thank you very much. Yeah, it's not the shortest amount of time I've been asked to give a talk. I've been to a conference and said, someone's dropped out, they've got a talk in 5 minutes, can someone jump in? I'm like, yep, I've got slides to give, or I'll just stand and live code something for an hour, right, okay. So who was here for lightning talks in November? Okay, quite a lot of people, awesome. Because yeah, I did a really quick lightning talk about this stuff back then, so this will give us a good chance to dive a bit deeper into the whole thing, instead of just me typing a couple of things on the screen. It's a Nix talk with some PHP, rather than a PHP talk with some Nix in it. So I've given this talk at some other conferences and meetup groups, like Tech Mids in Birmingham recently, so general sort of tech agnostic conference. So the examples were in PHP, which is great because we're at a PHP meetup. But if you're a JavaScript developer or whatever, like replace PHP and Composer with your things here as we go. The same concepts would apply to anything, basically. So a little bit about me. I've been doing web development and software since 2007. I started doing Drupal in 2008, so I've been doing that for quite a while. I also do some JavaScript and TypeScript in Go. Go's been quite fun recently. And then around 2015, I started using Linux. I'm sure I used it before that, but that was definitely when I remember going to a job and they're like, hey, there's a laptop in the drawer over there you can use. And it was some old Acer thing that I installed Ubuntu on it. No, actually, I'm sure I did it in my first job in 2010 as well. But that was the first time I really have gone sort of full on Linux in sort of daily driver mode. Started doing Nix and NixOS in 2022, and then started doing home lab stuff in about 2024. Even when I was doing my Linux stuff before, I was looking for ways to automate stuff. So if anyone's used things like Vagrant and Puppet and Ansible, like those sorts of automation tools, because I just wanted to be able to set things up really quickly and reproducibly. And those are my sort of tools that I used before, and you may have seen me give talks about those things before. When I talk about home labs, you might be imagining something like this, some crazy sort of thing. I know it's not a home lab talk. This was the first one that I did. This was my old Tuxedo machine. The hinge on the back broke sort of over here, so I ripped the screen off and sort of used it as a nice little headless server. Yeah, that was quite fun. Home Lab 1.0. On that Home Lab, it's actually not on there anymore. I've got 2 little mini PCs that I use now instead. I've got my website that's running on my server at home. Forgeo, I believe is the right way to pronounce it. It's sort of your own self-hosted GitHub, essentially. That's running on there. So I've moved most of my stuff off GitHub and other places onto this now, running on my server at home. And it's interesting being in the open source space, where I work a lot with PHP and Drupal. I've spoken to clients who've gone, I'd really like to use something like this instead of using GitHub or GitLab or something, but I don't know how to set it up, or it would take too long, or I want to use some open source issue tracker. We'll see how I've got this set up in a minute. Jellyfin is my home media server with all my DVDs on it. Got more than that now, but I don't know how many I've got, probably near to 300, and a load of TV shows on it. So my own Netflix in a box running on my machine at home. Image is like a Google photo replacement, so you can see pictures of my doggies on the screen. And yeah, I'm going to be writing a book, or I'm writing a book on Nix for PHP developers specifically, just as a perpetually publishing book that I'm going to just keep updated over time. So as soon as I'm finished with sculpting from scratch, I'll be getting onto this, which will happen eventually. So, you guys, so who here is using Linux on the machine? Anybody using Linux on their stuff already? Oh, cool, quite a few. Mac OS, a lot of people, and Windows. Ooh, okay. So yeah, Linux is my daily driver. I've used Mac OS before. Like Mac people are using Homebrew or some sort of package manager tool. Lots of nodding, awesome. And then my day job thing is running Windows and running WSL with Ubuntu, or was Ubuntu, now is running NixOS inside it. Cool, nice mixture of people. Who has PHP or your language of choice installed somehow on your machine? I would imagine most people, given it's a PHP meetup. Again, if it's JavaScript or whatever is the thing, replace PHP with that. Who has multiple versions of the thing installed? Yeah. So I'd imagine you're either going to be testing multiple versions of things, multiple projects with different PHP versions or different Node versions or whatever, right? There's lots of reasons why we can't just have one globally installed PHP or whatever on your machine, right? Lots of people, particularly if you're freelancing or agency work, you need to have different projects with different requirements. These are some of the ways I can think of installing PHP. I think I've done all of these. WAMP is the Windows Apache MySQL PHP, if I remember rightly. MAMP is the Mac equivalent, and then I'm never sure if it's XAMPP or XAMPP, but the same sort of idea. Homebrew, Mac people, right? Brew install PHP, brew install something. Package manager, instead of downloading the exe files, rather than download them, double clicking them, just run commands in the terminal. If using Linux, there's a variety of package managers. So it depends which flavor of Linux you're using, depends on which package manager you've got. So we've got apt, ET, DNF, Pacman, there's loads of them, right? It really depends on what flavor of Linux you're using. Laravel has its own thing, so you can download the desktop tool, Herd or Sail, I'm not sure which is the one people are using there, desktop tools.
Sail's the Docker skin,
right.
And Herd is the MySQL, or is a version switch it will.
Thanks.
That's cool.
Symfony's got a CLI. I don't know if it installs PHP with it, but it's there. That's another thing you could use. ASDF is pretty cool. If anyone's used that, it's similar to Nix in a way. You have a tool versions file that you have to sort of download everything in advance. Containers, right? Everyone's using containers a lot these days. So Docker, AdXC containers or Podman containers, right? Operating system in a box inside the machine. Or you could go full-on virtual machine, so VirtualBox or VMware or Vagrant. I don't know, Vagrant. So yeah, these are some of the ways I can think of. Any more? Any I've not thought of?
Build it directly.
Build, yeah, just download it tools. Yeah, awesome. Cool. So yeah, today we're going to talk about Nix. So what is Nix? And it's not a very easy question to answer, to be honest, because it's multiple things. It's a package manager, first of all, with more than 120,000 packages. So that's Nix packages, NIX-PKGS. That's the repository on GitHub that has packages in it. NixOS is the operating system. The two are not the same. You don't have to use NixOS to use Nix. You can install Nix, the package manager, on any other version of Linux or on macOS or anything. So the two are not the same. It's a tool for building software reproducibly and reliably. So I'll talk about more about that in a minute. Nix itself is the language you write Nix in. So it's sort of JSON-ish, but it's a functional programming language, which is cool. But there are different implementations of it. So there are ones called Lix and tvix. So it's other implementations. I think tvix is written in Rust that use the same Nix package repository, which is pretty interesting. There are other tools in this sort of ecosystem. There's Home Manager for managing your home configuration files. Nix-Darwin is the macOS sort of version to sort of manage more of your macOS stuff. DevEnv, DevBox, there's loads of other ones actually. I found this quite recently, really, it's realistically speaking, but it's been around since 2003. It was based on this research paper by Echo Dahlstrom back then. So the whole time I've been starting out before and I'm running WAMP and XAMPP and everything, and learning Vagrant and Ansible and Puppet, this was already there, at least in some form behind the scenes, but I only found it quite recently. So it sort of replaced Ansible and Puppet and everything else for me once I started using it. So just to recap quickly, Nix is a package manager, build tool, operating system, language. All these things are sort of Nix together. Might be confusing. I'll try and clarify as we go which thing I'm talking about when, but yeah, it can be a bit confusing. So, how do I find out where these packages are? This is the search.nixos.org website, and there's a little bar where you can put in what the thing is you're trying to search for. It'll come up with a list of stuff. you can see that there's channels. So there's a 2505 channel. In this screenshot, we'd be on 2511 now. Or you can use unstable. So unstable is just more regularly updated things. The stable versions are every 6 months. So they're November and May. Typically, the Linux ones are 2404 and 2410. So April and October. These are sort of a month after that. So yeah, you can pick whether you want how stable or not you want it to be, which is pretty cool. From a PHP perspective, these are some of the things that are in Nix packages that we can use. So PHP itself, the top one is 8.4.11. It's probably bumped up a little bit now since I took these screenshots. But there's also PHP 8.3, there's 8.2, there's multiple versions of PHP itself in the package manager, which is pretty cool. There are also things like just tooling, so PHP unit, factor, there's Vim plugins, there's all this other stuff that are there. It doesn't quite replace Composer in the same way, but it would if you wanted to use PHP unit, you could install it through this rather than through Composer. But it's not a full-on replacement. Here's a graph. You'll have a good graph. So remember I was saying about all those other package repositories in like apt and DNF and whatever, like they're all down here in the bottom left-hand corner. So we've got number of packages along the bottom and then freshness at the top. So the more packages are over here, the more new the package or recent the packages are over there. So everything else is down here. We've got Ubuntu and Fedora and everything else down here. AUR is the Arch user repository. So a lot of people use Arch Linux because they like the packages or get all these other packages. And yeah, I don't know how many exactly are in there now. But yeah, Arch is over here and then Nix is over this side. So 2211, 2305, 2511, so 2311. And then unstable is right in the top right-hand corner. So it has the most packages in it and the most recent and fresh packages that are available. Not often do I find something that's not there already. But there's also loads of pull requests from people adding more stuff all the time, including me, but we'll get to that later on. And yeah, we'll see how we do that in a minute. So installing Nix is pretty easy. You just go on the website and it gives you a command, a little installer command you can run. And they're slightly different based on what you're installing it on. If you're installing it on Mac OS, for example, you don't have systemd, so you run a slightly different command, basically. But once you've done it, you get the Nix command at the bottom, so you can run things like nix-version. Yeah. And it's pretty good. It tells you exactly what it's going to do before it does anything. So it sets up build users and things in your machine. It'll create a directory called the Nix store. Yeah, it tells you exactly what it's going to do. And yeah, so it's not hiding anything away from what it's doing, which is quite nice. So by comparison, if you want to install a fresh version of Ubuntu and go about installing PHP on it, this is what you would do. You have to run apt update to get the latest package information, first of all. Otherwise, you're not going to get the latest versions of things. You're going to run apt-get install PHP, and then you have a global version of PHP. It's just a user bin PHP. And then yeah, you've got one version, which at the time was 8.3.6. One version of PHP globally, and you replace this with Brew or DNF or whatever your package manager of choice is. Yeah. Running with Nix is a little bit different. So also I'm not saying installing, so I'm running it essentially. You can run any of those packages that we saw earlier just by running a command and just run them once if you want to. It's a little bit different. So the command is nix run, and then the repository name, so nix packages, hash the package name. So nix hash PHP, -v is 8.4.11. Yeah, so you don't need to do the update or anything like this. This just runs out of the box. It downloads it, compiles it, adds it to your path, everything, just for like this one-off command. If you want to run multiple commands, multiple things, you can also use what's called nix shell. So it will make a new bash prompt for you. It will alter or add to your path variable, which is where it tells you to look for packages, and it will add the version of PHP or whatever to the path to make it available for you. So in this example, it's user bin PHP. You can only have one of them without putting numbers and things on the end, right? This version is not in that place at all. It's in the Nix store, which is where it stores everything. And this hash is a crazy long hash that's the version of the package and all the dependencies and everything else, which is why it's reproducible, because the hash is all different. This is also how it avoids collisions with different versions of PHP and different versions of everything else. And yeah, it knows how to find that. The cool thing is, we can just run these ephemeral commands and just say, if we want to run something that's PHP 8.3, we can run the 8.3 package, and we've got the thing of 8.3 or 8.2. Or any of those other versions that we saw earlier on, we can run. And again, if you want, this could be JavaScript or Go or whatever you want. This is good for like one-off things, but what if you want to do more than one thing? Best way to do it is have a file called shell. You could say nix shell -p, and that will make a shell with a thing in it, and you could add multiple -ps, but that's going to be difficult. I'll forget what the commands are, and then I shouldn't have to tell a coworker or somebody, like, run this command with all these options in it. What I'd rather do is make a file like shell.nix. So this is sort of like Dockerfile-ish. I guess that's the best comparison I can think of. So it's written in the Nix language. It's a functional language, so the first line of the arguments being passed into the function, as I understand it. So we can import Nix packages if one isn't passed in. So yeah, if there is one, use it. Otherwise, sub-import the global version. And then there's a package called make shell, which makes a shell script or makes a bash prompt with these packages in it. So if I want PHP and Composer and Factor, then that's the file I need to make with some other little boilerplate bits. No, so that is the whole file. Then I can run Nix shell, give it the name of the shell, and it then boots me into that shell. It changes the prompt, so by default, because it's a self-contained environment, and in there I can run Composer or whatever I want to run. When I go out of the shell, those things no longer exist. They exist in the store, but they're not available on my path anymore for me to do anything with. So that's cool. A more recent approach, or a still technically experimental approach, is using flakes. So I can do the same. I can import the shell.nix into this if I want to. So we start off by declaring inputs and then outputs. So the inputs are going to be the Nix packages repository itself. So this is using unstable. If I wanted to use a stable release, I would just replace unstable with the tag name or the branch name or the commit ID, if I really wanted to, like lock it down to this specific commit of Nix packages. If I need a really old version of PHP that's not supported, I can pin Nix packages to a point in time when that version was available, and it'll install it from there. Then my outputs are the dev shell. I'm going to inherit the shell.nix file we just saw. And in this case, it's going to run on x86-64 Linux, but it can run on ARM, it can run on things. It does cross-compilation as well across different things. So you could build for Mac on Linux if you really wanted to. It would be cool. Or we could inline it, and this is, again, just really common. So instead of having a separate shell.nix, it sits inside the make shell itself. Just inline everything. Yeah, so that lives in your repository. So this is an example from the Sculpin project. So we've got a composer.json and composer lock file. Flake.nix we just saw. Flake.lock is the really crucial thing. So it locks down Nix itself to the versions of when you install it. So you commit those into your repository. So similarly, same idea as composer lock or package lock JSON files. The great thing about that is I can share that file with anybody. You can run it and get exactly the same versions of everything. We don't have the sort of latest problem, like when different people run things, and now latest is different, or some other dependency under the hood has changed. Everything's exactly the same, because it's using the same commit hashes, the same versions of everything, which is why it's reproducible. And yeah, exactly. So there's the rest of my sculpting files. We can import multiple versions of Nix packages if we want to. So Nix packages URL is like our default one, which is unstable. But if we wanted multiple things, something breaks, for example, like I've had this with a couple of my things, I've had to sort of pin it to an older version. I can import multiple versions and pin them to the tags or the commit hash or whatever, and just reference them as stable or unstable or particular versions. So one project, I think I've still got this like a 7.4 project or something. So I've got to pin Nix packages to an older version so that when I say get PHP, it knows to get 7.4. Yeah, it's great. You can do that. So we don't have to do stable or rolling. We can do both or mixture of. So this is great for like simple things, or maybe just running like scripts or whatever. But what if you need something a bit more complex? If you've got a Drupal application or something that needs like a database or whatever. If you're running NixOS, awesome, because it manages all your services and the whole machine. So if I need a MySQL database or a MariaDB database, I can just say services.mysql.enable is true. That installs the server, adds all the startup scripts and everything in. That'll just run when I boot my machine. And then I can configure it by saying initial databases. So maybe I've got project A, project B, whatever. It'll go and it'll create those for you. So what we're not doing is writing commands like create database, create user, add user to database, everything. We're writing things in a declarative way. I think that's the right one. This is the end state we want the system to be in. Run whatever commands you need in the background to make that happen. We don't care, which is awesome. Without NixOS, like especially for open source stuff, you don't want to sort of assume that everyone's running the whole operating system, because it might not be. But there is the idea of a services flake that gives you a bit more control over the services. So this is over a couple of slides. So we add these things to our inputs. So we've got Nix packages, we saw earlier. We're also going to add in another dependency called flake parts. But the key thing here is process, compose, and services. So we're just adding in, and these are just Git repos. Like it knows, which is quite cool, yeah, GitHub : something, because it knows where GitHub is. So you don't have to type the whole thing, you can just shorthand it. So it'll just download those and then add those essentially as arguments into your configuration. Like this. We can import one of those things. So the process compose has a module that it exposes that we can import. And then we set up the process compose part, which is the sort of server part. Services and settings. So by services, in this case, are going to be MySQL. So MySQL 1, enable. This is basically the same thing we just saw, right? This is services.mysql.enable, but with a bit more boilerplate around it because it needs it. But this will run anyway. So, and then settings. So I want to start a web server also in the thing. So I'm going to declare that here as well. So I'm going to end up with multiple services. This is like my Docker compose YAML file, essentially. And this process relies on MySQL running. So you get that sort of dependency thing between different services. And then, yeah, there's my dev shell again. Same thing as before with PHP and Composer. Run it. So you run Nix run something rather than Nix develop, because we need to run the application. You get a cool little sort of TUI output here of all the different things that it's booted up. So we've got our MySQL database at the beginning, server running, and then we've got the configure, which is going to create the databases for you, and then the PHP. And you can see all the logs and things as it's going, which is pretty cool. So yeah, this is Docker Compose essentially running in the background. So yeah, once we've done that, we get something like this. Yeah, everything's up and running, which is cool. Not a Docker or a container in sight, which is pretty cool. So yeah, coming back to multiple PHPs. These are, again, some of the ways I think we can do it. Laravel has got its own sort of thing, like Mike was saying, there's like drop-downs of which version of PHP you want to run. MAMP does the same thing, but I'll forget which version's which, and I don't, yeah, that's not scalable for me. Containers, yep, everyone's familiar with different Docker containers. But I don't necessarily want to write a whole operating system to sort of just switch the version of PHP. There are some things that I found, like PHP Brew, PHP Switcher, and PHP Brew, which are sort of things that say that they do this. I've not used them. ASDF, yeah, it's probably the closest thing I can find. .tool versions file. This one uses this version of PHP. It does some stuff for you. Before that, like I say, Vagrant, VMware, like whole virtual machines just to install PHP, or different physical machines, like different servers or different laptops, potentially. Like, this is my PHP7 laptop, which is its own other thing. So yeah, Node has NVM, which is the Node version manager. So I like to think of this as like Nix is like NVM for everything, right? PHP and everything, especially using NixOS, right? You can use just do whatever you want. So this is my ideal environment. This is what I wanted to do. I wanted to go into my machine and just run PHP something and be told, like, yeah, you don't have PHP. I don't really want or need to have it installed like globally. It doesn't matter. If I go into a project directory, I suddenly wanted to have all my stuff, basically. So yeah, this project needs this version of PHP. Maybe it needs browser sync. Maybe it needs Tailwind CSS. Maybe it needs something else as well, right? Again, it's not just PHP. So I want, yeah, whatever that project needs to just be available and work. I don't have to explain how containers and virtualization work to junior devs. Ideally, it's one less thing that they need to learn. So it'd be great if I could just do this and say, go into the directory, and then like everything is there. Awesome. So we can do that using what we've already seen, but also using a tool called durenv. So I don't know if anybody's sort of used this, but there's a Nix integration for it. So I can install it just by saying programs.durenv.enable. That enables it, now it installs it for you. And then there's a Nix version as well. So it's an environment variable manager, I think is probably the best way to describe it, based on the directory. So you go into the directory, you make a file called envrc, and it will say, hey, you go into the directory, run that command, or whatever commands are in that file. So this is good if you want to add in your AWS credentials, environment variables or something, but we can also use it for this as well. So if you've got a flake.nix, we can just say use flake, and it will magically load it up and make it the active thing. If you don't have this, you go into the directory, you run nix develop, it changes your shell and everything. This will keep your same prompt, and it will just magically be there for you. If you don't have flakes, you can just say use Nix as well, so it'll use the shell.nix file if you've got one. You can actually do quite a lot of other stuff with this. I've been looking into it recently as well, like adding things to your path sort of arbitrarily. I don't know if anybody else does it, but I have like a bin directory full of binaries and scripts and things. So I've added that to my path before using like a git safe thing, but durenv can do that as well. You just say path add bin or something, and it's just magically everything's already added. Awesome. Automatically. This is great if you've got flake nix in your repository, but what if you don't? Maybe you just want something quick to spin up. You can give it a remote flake. So any URL on GitHub or anywhere else, I've got a dev shells repo with a couple of generic sort of environments for things. I can just point it at that, and it will download that file and find it, and it'll work from there. So I don't use it for sort of projects, but I use it just for like open source stuff or just for testing out a thing. It's cool. I can just say, use this environment I've already built, please, rather than rebuilding everything from scratch. And yeah, if it's on GitHub or somewhere, it knows where that is, so you can shorten it. Mine's not. Mine's on the 4J or thing, so I have to give it the whole path. So, packaging stuff. So this is how we package stuff for Nix. So these are how the 120,000 packages are built. And this is the hello program. Right? So you type in hello and it comes back with hello world. Right? That's the simplest thing I can think of to find. So this is the package.nix file for that package in the repository. So Nix package repository is full of files like this. There's no binaries or exe files or DMGs or anything. It's just these .nix files that live there. So instead of being the software, it's the instructions of how you build the software live inside the Nix packages repository. So there's an idea of what they call a derivation, which to me is just a version of a package with its thing. So it takes arguments like the package name or the P name is hello. It knows what version of it you're trying to install. It knows where the source code is. So it'll download it from this URL. But also it knows what the hash of it is. So if that was to change, the build would fail. So if somebody republished a version on the same tag of something, like it will fail. This is what makes it reproducible and everything. It hashes everything. You can add more stuff to it as well. It's environment variables. It's sort of an opinionated build tool. So it's got built-in checks and things. So you've got things like do check, do install check. There's different phases that it runs, like build, install, test, check, whatever. So you can opt in or opt out of different things or extend them. I've got a little shell script called preview that just goes into a directory and runs browser sync. I do this a lot with Sculpin projects because it doesn't automatically live reload to the browser. So I wanted to sort of simplify this a little bit because I can never remember all these commands at the bottom. So I'm using Nix to write the script that I would have wrote anyway, but then wrapping it with the dependencies that the script needs. So the script obviously needs browser sync to be installed, so I can add it as an input, as a dependency. And it will automatically add it to my path. I don't have browser sync like installed as a thing, but it knows to inject it into this script because I've added it as a dependency. So I don't forget, but again, I could share this with anybody else, and I don't have to say, oh, remember to install browser sync, because it does it for you. It's already there, which is cool. So packaging PHP stuff next. So before we had the standard environment and the make derivation, that's like the base layer, the base level. There are wrappers around that because it knows how to build different things. So for PHP, there's a package called Build Composer Project, which builds Composer, right? So it's wrapping that make derivation function with some PHP opinionated stuff around it. Like, so it knows that you need to do, actually this one it doesn't, but like, for package lock, it will run npm run build or whatever. It's got conventions in it that it knows how to build. So for PHP, again, we can just say this is the definition for factor, the language server. It knows the name and the version. It knows that it's on GitHub, so we don't need to say, you could say the source is the current directory if you're trying to package the thing, your thing that you're building. But yeah, if you want to get it from GitHub, you just say get from GitHub, because it knows what GitHub is, what the owner and the repo name is, and the tag you want to download. So it'll always get the same version. It knows what the hash is of that version, so we can know we're always going to get the same thing, otherwise it's going to fail. But because it's PHP, we've now got this vendor hash version of the box. It doesn't just hash the PHP thing you do, your thing, it's hashing all your dependencies as well. So if any of those change, again, your build fails, and you're just aware now that this is the same. So yeah, it knows how to do a lot of this stuff already. Pest, so PHP testing framework, if anybody's not familiar, looks very much the same, right? Obviously, the package name and the version are different, of course. We still get it from PHP from GitHub. Obviously, again, the hash is different as well. This one's got a composer lock file, so we can add that in as an option, and we've got a vendor hash. Sculpin, static site generator, basically the same, right? It's not worth me showing it on the slide. It's the same thing with, obviously with Sculpin in there already. I've actually contributed this back to Nix packages now. I've got a PR that's hopefully that's waiting for review, so it'd be nice to get that in there actually. So once I do this, or I'll have that Nix file in there, I can say Nix build, It puts everything in a result, which is a symlink into the store, and then from there I can run sculpin generate. So if I do that, I don't need to run Composer actually at all, because it's all already packaged in through Nix instead. And yeah, if you're doing NPM stuff, it's basically the same, but the builder is different. Use a different wrapper. So instead of build Composer package, we can build an NPM package. For example, I was doing some OpenAPI generate HTML. So I was looking into OpenAPI stuff recently because we were doing API stuff. So I found this package called OpenAPI generate HTML, which is a node package. So it seemed good, wasn't in the store, so I wrote it. This lives in a Nix file in my repository that I import into another file. Yeah, it's there. Like I say, it's going to run npm run build, so I set it not to for this because it doesn't have one. So yeah, you can override or extend these things if you want to. Packaging Go. So another thing I found was OpenAPI mock, right? There's a pattern developing here, right? Instead of npm, we say build Go package, Go module, and it knows how to do that. Pretty much the same as the PHP file. So it's really easy to write these things and contribute them back into the Nix packages because they're all very sort of similar and very the same, very much the same. There are some more complicated ones. We need to do like substitute in place where you want to change values and things, and maybe there's hard-coded paths in there, but you've got the ability to do that and to override different stages as you need to get something to build. It's also the Nix REPL. So inside sort of a clone of the Nix packages repository, you can run this and say :L to load all the variables, and then :B to build something. So if I want to build factor, it will do it. And this is the derivation. So this is the package that it built. And yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, you can do that. That's quite a nice way of just going in and iterating and seeing exactly what it's doing. So don't use it very often, but it's cool that it's there. And then, yeah, Nix in production. So I get asked this a lot, like it's good for sort of dev environments, but can we use it like on our production servers? Yeah, there's services there if you're going to run Nix OS. So you can say enable services dot whatever. So PHP, FPM enable, MySQL enable, or Nginx enable. This is how I'm running my static sites on my server at home. And then, yeah, the home lab stuff, again, it's just services.jellyfin.enable. Like that creates everything, basically. There's more configuration options that we can pass, but that's usually enough just to get something running out of the box. Image is the same, or paperless is quite a cool thing for managing all your papers and things. So yeah, I don't need to know how to configure these things because it does that for you. Like Nix becomes sort of the universal configuration language at this point. So I can configure all these things in Nix regardless of what they use. And if they change, Lacquity terminal sort of moved from YAML to TOML or something a while ago, but my configurations are Nix, so it doesn't matter. Sort of a learn once, run everywhere type approach. So, if you're not sure, there are Docker images available for Nix. You can build Docker images with Nix, but you can also use Nix in Docker, which is quite fun. So I've actually been using this in CI. If Nix maybe isn't available, run Docker, run Nix in the thing, and run the same things in it. But yeah, if you want to test it out, there are images there you can use, test it out, see if it works for you. But yeah, I like the ability. I can just run the same step every time I get the same version of the software built. I know if I want to run, if this laptop died, hopefully it doesn't, that I could get it back up and running again by applying the same configuration onto different machines. And like all my window manager and all my projects and everything will be set up exactly the same. Everything's reproducible, which, yeah, was what I was wanting to do back in 2015 with Ansible and Puppet and everything back then. So it does this for you. Cool. That's everything I've got. There's some links. It's useful. All my Nix config code is up on my Git account. So you can see how I've set up all my lab and the servers and everything. Yeah, that's it. I don't know if you've got time. Have you got questions, Dave? Have we got some questions? Have you got questions, or I can do some demos or whatever? You'll see. Yeah.
All the packages by just have to work on all platforms? Like, if you contribute a package, will it just build on a Mac, on x86, or whatever?
So all packages don't need to work on every operating system. So no, is the short answer. So yeah, you can, in the systems thing, you say like which package it works for, but it can cross-compile if you wanted it to.
Or you can...
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So.
Is there any support for Nix in IDEs like PHPSW? Like if you open this project, it knows to use the right...
Good question. Nix in PHP, I don't know, I'm a Vim user, right? So I don't know, it's, yeah, so for me, I just use DRM. So if you had something like that running, or if you had like a terminal sort of setup where you had like the code on the top, the terminal on the bottom, then you could either run something like Nix develop or just have DRM booted up. I don't know what other integration might be useful for that, but maybe it would it know which version of PHP you're running from that? Probably it would. I haven't tried it for a while, but that's what I've been doing anyway. Dave?
Is it kind of sandbox, like Docker? You can have whatever going on in a Docker container, and that can't really leak out.
Yeah.
Unless you absolutely can. What about this? Could Nix, so could one of these modules, whatever, access anything on the file system of the host?
Shouldn't be able to. So it should just do stuff inside the Nix store, and then just symlink stuff out of there, really. So it shouldn't do in the way you're asking. There are things like Home Manager, which then let you do things in your user configuration space. So if you want to, or your .config directory, if you want to configure like your ZSH or your things in that directory. It's just not containerized in that way. So you might have a case where there might be you've already got a database called test, because maybe you've got it on another project. So yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Because if it's not containerized, what is the protection?
So there are different users and things. I don't know whether it goes as far as setting up different accounts for things like databases, but I'll have to try.
So number one thing that comes to my mind, like looking at this, is that XKCD comic of there's too many standards. Let's make a new standard that standardizes.
Yeah, now we've got one more standard. Yeah.
That is what this feels like to me. And that, like you mentioned, it's like it can install like dependencies for your project, but it's not a drop-in replacement for Composer or NPM as such. So where would you cross that line? When do you reach for like Composer or Docker or some of the other package managers?
Yeah, it's definitely not replacing Composer from PHP, but there are languages where it has just replaced some native package manager, I guess more in the functional space. Is it Haskell or Rust? One of them, like people have stopped using sort of the normal package manager and moved to this because it's more in line with what they used to from that perspective. It would be interesting to see whether it could sort of be a Composer replacement, actually. There's like a whole section of Python packages, a whole section of Vim plugins. Like, could there be a thing where all the PHP, the packages repositories get moved across and imported in potentially? It'd be interesting to find that out. I'm gonna sort of look at that at some point because the Vim plugins one is just a big JSON file full of plugins and it sort of generates the derivations based on that JSON file. So could we do something similar for Composer? If I can get the Sculpin stuff merged, then I wouldn't have to use Composer at all in that project if I'm just using that. But then I can just use one package manager for everything. If I'm running Sculpin, which is PHP, Tailwind is Node, and then maybe I'm using Browser Sync or whatever, I can manage all that with one package manager, potentially, which is quite interesting to me. I just have one command that runs everything instead of running Composer install, then npm install, all these things. So, I don't know what the plans are or who sort of necessarily maintains that, but there are things like PHP unit factor and stuff, but not like every Composer package in Nix. But maybe there could be. Don't know. Go.
How does immutability versions work or not work? Like, I can get the terminology wrong, but I think you created Flake, which looked like it was a particular version of a particular piece of software.
Yeah.
So whenever I run that Flake, I get exactly the same version.
Yeah.
So how do I do an upgrade of it?
So So you can, from a Flake perspective, you can run Nix Flake update. Yep, we'll update your Flake lock file to have the new hashes of that, and then when you Nix install from that, it'll bring down the latest versions. Yeah.
What's the kind of, if you've got a project that you're handing to me that you've set up and...
You want a project?
Well, like, if you set something up with Nix, that's like a PHP project that I want to contribute something to, once I've installed Nix and I sort of kind of run that, which then presumably is setting up the sort of the right PHP version, the right NPM or whatever other things, do I then need to worry about Nix? Do I just sort of use everything else at that point? It's all just kind of transparent to me, I can just run PHP and it all just works, or do I have to actually know some Nix stuff to kind of work with it?
Not really. I mean, I say I'm working with this on projects at the moment where we're doing Drupal, which is PHP, and then we've got Vue.js things that's got a flake.nix in it. I've got some static page stuff and a little microsite. They're all using Nix flakes in there, which are nice. But then I've just set it up in such a way that you just go into that directory, Durham boots up, and suddenly that version of PHP or that version of Node is there already. Whereas when I have to do that with like containers, I have to sort of say, right, now you need to run this command. Now you need to run this command, which is docker compose or podman exec, blah, 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 it, something, something, something. Yeah, it's much easier if once you've got this thing running, you just run npm install. Because that's what they would have done anyway, if they had it installed, just one installed globally. So in my mind, it takes away a thing. Like, yeah, it is a new thing to learn, but it's, a package, you run Nix develop or something, and suddenly it's all there. And yeah, you just run your commands as normal. You don't have to write like make files, which then sort of wrap the command around the whole thing because you've got 20 arguments to pass to a container. Yeah, that's what I think anyway. But I'm sure people might disagree, but I like it. Yeah, it's definitely, like I keep a bin directory for the scripts and things, but in there I just assume that these things are installed because they're in my shell already. But if I did want something specific, I could make the shell script with Nix and have it inject the things in it that I needed if I wanted to. So yeah, possibilities are endless, I think. I'm always finding stuff. Mike?
I run a lot of Docker,
Yep.
and I have several projects open running at the same time
Yep.
that I can independently switch between. I guess with this, it's a bit more like what you would do with Paired, and you do say, I want to use PHP 8.4 now, and I run that, and if I need another project which has a different version, I say I'll stop running that and switch to the other. Or is it that you can independently run projects? Or is that where you were saying with the directory structure? So you could say if I've got the directory mappings in, this project uses these stuff, so every time I'm in this directory I'm using 8.2, over there I'm using 8.4, so I can interchange between.
Yeah, you can have both running at the same time.
Yeah, but that would be on that conventional, like when you've got the extra in the directory setting, whereas the standard one would just be like more like the Paired, where you say I'm using 8.4 and everything is using.
Yeah, I mean, and you could use it in that way if you did want to just say install it globally. But I had it running like the really complex TUI thing the other day because I was trying to do I had to do a module upgrade between a break-in version. So I used Git work trees, which is a different talk. But I had like the develop work tree and then like my feature branch work tree over here, and the two are running simultaneously. I can just switch in tmux between the different sessions that I'm running. So I can have both running at the same time. I don't need to stop and start anything. So the only thing
if you're running it, then because you've got multiple versions, it's just effectively changing your A.
Yeah, my databases work on sockets, so they were fine. Web server stuff, I had to make sure I had a different port. So I had to go, localhost 8080 for that work tree and then 8081 for that work tree. But the two were just running separately. Which can actually come back to Dave's question. They both had the same database running in both and weren't clashing, so they must have done that somewhere.
I was going to ask about the database or any other service that you launch. Like, is that the data store, is that isolated? Like if you're in a Docker environment, you have your own private data store, however you do the volume mapping. So is this in like the system database where it was drawing all the involved somewhere?
Yeah, I must have got it working somehow, because I definitely had 2 versions of the project running simultaneously and weren't conflicting. So either that, or I've got maybe MySQL right into a directory or something in that hidden directory or something. But it's definitely doable, because yeah, it was great. I had 2 work trees with the same project. And I was like, oh yeah, that's the problem, fixed. It was cool. So yeah, without having to manually switch versions, because I'd forget. So, any more? Yeah.
If you have to, if you want to experiment with, if you have a script that you know runs in PHP7, you want to see how well it runs in PHP8, do you have to rename the folder it's in, or is there some variable you can switch?
Yeah, let's see. I just went past it, I think. Yeah, but you can even do things like this. You can just say index run with a different package version, package name, and just pass if you've got just a script, just pass that version to it, and that would work. So that's what I've been doing with things. So yeah, you don't need to then necessarily change the directory or anything. You can just say run this script or these variables against this version of the package. So really easy. Not container in sight. It's cool.
What's the main advantage you see that this could get in?
It's definitely less of an overhead, because I think you don't have a whole operating system in a container just to run a particular version of PHP or whatever. The common, if you watch other people give talks about it who know more about it than me, is like, what I took away is there's no dockerfile.lock, essentially. So if you run a Docker command and I run a Docker command, you could get different versions of the same thing, even though you say, especially if you say like latest, that's definitely going to change, right? But you could end up with different versions of the same thing. Whereas yeah, with this you can't do it because you've got the log file. So yeah, it's having that reproducibility at build time, but then yeah, that's how you get bugs if your version is slightly different to my version or whatever. So yeah, it sort of solves that problem. This whole talk that people do about that is one Matthew Krogan did about use flake.nix, not Dockerfile, which is quite a cool sort of talk. And yeah, I was using it for like this sort of stuff, basic stuff for a while, but just wasn't doing it for like Drupal, because I was like, how do I manage the databases in a good way? And then I found all that services, Flake stuff, which someone has now done a Drupal Flake example that's on Drupal.org. So yeah, I'm going to have a look at that and sort of see what I can learn from it as well. So yeah, it's a really cool sort of system. So it's definitely got, it's been around forever, not forever, but yeah, for a while. But yeah, it definitely seems to have taken off from popularity the last few years for some reason. Definitely not because of me. I've definitely got on the wave somehow. So I find out better. Go on. I'm in the time.
Yeah, I don't know.
No, it's fine.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
So you said you had your home lab or home server, whatever, running this stuff. Does it have stuff to, I was just clicking through your repo. I wasn't really ignoring any questions I want to know. Does it, like, are the services you're pulling up on that, are they able to connect to each other?
Yeah.
Yes. Do they just like address localhost on a different port? Like, so you've got home system and then you've got like Jellybean and stuff. Can they? I don't know what home system.
I guess in theory you should. Yeah. Yeah. I've split it out into two different. I got 2 little micro PCs now, so I've sort of put like the internal stuff is like Jellyfin and image are on that one, just like the internal stuff, which I can get to from Tailscale. It's a whole other talk. But like the website stuff and the sort of production things, mostly just static sites and things. But then they've got Nginx running and then Cloudflare tunnels sat in front of them. So websites couldn't read because they're on different boxes now. But yeah, like image could probably talk to Jellyfin if there's different user accounts and things. So probably not, but they're all on the same box.
Yes, you put security in so they can't for whatever reason, but in theory it's all doable. The structure's there to kind of configure it to talk or not talk.
Yeah, if you want to.
That's one of the pain points. Like Docker networking is like, it's not hard once you understand it, but it's not, I don't know, I didn't find it was that intuitive when I started doing Docker.
True. Any more?